Hello and welcome. I'm Adri Gregan, and I'm back for more Vinland Saga. Today we're getting into Season 1, Episode 2, and last time we had a really solid pilot episode. A great introduction into the world, the characters, and what I think is safe to say the backstory, effectively, of our main character, Thorfinn. Even though he is set to be our main character, and I'm sure this is mainly in service to him and building out his past and his history, the episode was really more focused on his father, Thor's. And it really did a good job with that. It really established so many different sides of him, and I really look forward to seeing how it goes, even if the ending has me a little concerned about what'll happen. But I know basically nothing about this show. I'm going in almost completely blind, so we'll just have to see where it goes, basically. But other than that, we of course had the introduction of Vinland itself, the early Americas, way back in the first, or I guess the 10th and 11th centuries AD. And this is, of course, historically accurate. A lot of people probably don't realize that the Vikings discovered the Americas well before most of the other Europeans, half a millennium later. But it is true. And even though they didn't really leave that much of a mark, at least not a noticeable enough one to make a lasting impression on our history and like in our history books, it is definitely worthy of recognition. And I don't exactly know too much about that history, so what I've told you is basically the extent of what I know. Though it sounds like this story may take a lot of historical inspiration, obviously, right? It's historical fiction. So it's probably for the best that I don't know a super deep detail about this history, because I guess it could be spoilers in the story, as amusing as that is to say. Regardless, I'm excited to see where it goes. And before we get into the episode, though, of course, I want to get into this series' first comment spotlight. Oh, jeez, if this isn't indicative of what the series will be like, then I don't know what is. It may just be the very first comment spotlight of the series, but we've already got a comment section where I'll have to respond to multiple of the commentators, so I guess it's a comment section spotlight. Not to say that this will be the norm. These are, at least they used to be fairly irregular, but if you guys have several things I want to comment on, then I'm not going to limit myself to one. So, pardon me as I indulge myself and the IPPC, my community, with these comments. Just as fitting for this channel is the fact that the first of these comments I'll be responding to is by Alex, the original IPPC member, who really started things off. Well, I guess I technically started things off, but you know, you know. I won't be responding to all of what Alex says here because he says a lot of really interesting and fascinating stuff that are worth commenting on. But just for the sake of brevity and for things that I have to really talk about, I want to start right here. Alex points out the handling of these characters who have a large spotlight in this episode, particularly Thor's and Halfdan. Halfdan? Halfdan. I'll just say that for now. I'm probably pronouncing them all wrong, but it's also Viking Nordic culture, so I guess that's par for the course. Thor's is, of course, presented at first as a great warrior, right? An incredible, unstoppable force. And also very calculating in battle. He's easily maneuverable, right? He's not just some brute. And at the same time, he's an incredible father figure, not only towards his actual children, but just to the people of his village. So it's a lot of positive masculinity, but within that umbrella are very different and uh, not quite opposite, but uh, opposite ends of a spectrum, I suppose, when it comes to these actual traits, right, of this masculinity. And on the other hand, we have Halfdan, who is very antagonistic, very villainous, the kind of guy who will gladly rope up and tear apart the skin of his own guy because they're going against the law, going against his law, I suppose. And at the same time, even though Ilva, I believe, is Thorfinn's sister, I'm really working on that name for some reason. Even though Ilva is like terrified of Halfdan when he's confronting Thor's, Halfdan doesn't present this cocky, unreasonable attitude that you'd expect from this villainous figure, right? He's willing to be reasoned with, and he keeps his calm. So again, we have these almost contradictory qualities that basically break down the idea of these stereotypes you want to build with these characters and showing you that there are layers underneath them, that these two seemingly contradictory states can exist in the same time. And if you're getting a sense of deja vu here, it's because one of the biggest topics of my analysis from last episode was how from the literal first scene of the show, we're presented with this contrary world, right? This contradiction of a peaceful uh, world that I suppose is Vinland, that is the dreamscape Thor wakes up in, and then the harsh cut to the actual bloody battlefield he's on. This show is not afraid to switch between one or the other, uh, almost flippantly, almost without a care, because that's just the world they live in, right? So I really want to point this out because it's great how that's even exemplified in the characters themselves, as we're seeing here. And it implies that this story not only has this diversity and this subtlety, but that it is putting it front and center. That it really is a conscious decision from the author, and it is something we can expect more in the future. A quick clarification, and something I'm not going to comment on too much here, also an Alice's comment, is the description of the different afterlives in Norse mythology and Norse culture. I was obviously saying Valhalla because that's the most cited one in common culture, especially in America. And I did make a small comment, but I probably didn't emphasize this enough. I'm aware it's something for warriors. And what I didn't know is that how many different afterlives there are. And I'll save this here. You can like pause it if you want to read it, or better yet, go to the last episode and see this comment yourself. Like the comment while you're there because Alex really deserves it. But effectively, there's all these different ones, and as a like side comment of the day, some known here, another regular VIPPC, replies to that. As you can see with this bottom comment here, and one of several of Sumnon's comments last time, because he had quite a bit to say, that given his location, that makes a lot of sense. As you can see here, there is this idea that Norse mythology doesn't really have a heaven per se, right? It doesn't really have a paradise you get to after dying. All of the different afterlives seem like their own variations of a less than ideal spot, which is really interesting. I could go on many different tangents about this, but really, I think the thing I wanted to note here is it's really interesting how this sense of the afterlife isn't really used as a carrot in terms of like a carrot and a stick, right? Whereas in a lot of Western religions, like Christianity, especially the Christian religions, you have this idyllic place, right? This place without sin, this place that you reach after living a virtuous life. And then you have, of course, the contrast of hell, and whether you consider that to be a physical place of torment or emotional torment, it is these extremes, right? It is both the carrot and the stick. Whereas when you have something like this with Norse mythology, the closest place to heaven really does seem to be Valhalla, but that's basically just a training grounds. On one hand, you could take the Stoic direction and you could comment on how this seems to be emblematic of Stoicism, not necessarily originating from these Nordic cultures, but really being exemplified by them, right? Like a lot of these places apparently are devoid of suffering and aren't described as particularly like horrible places, but they're clearly not described as paradise, right? They're described as this place where you are free of suffering, but not a place where you have eternal happiness or anything like that, which seems to read to me as potentially signifying that these people aren't really in pursuit of happiness. They're not in pursuit of hedonism and in stuffing their faces. The happiest place here, Valhalla, is a place where you will be trained to be part of Odin's army to eventually serve at Ragnarok, right? It's not a place where you can relax and no longer have to like have any responsibilities and you can just you're home free. It's a place where you can take pride in defending your land and in fighting aside your king, your god, right? And that's really cool. I mean, I'm talking with incredibly limited information here, so take all of my conclusions here with a massive grain of salt. But I think it really does feel like a distinction between these Norse cultures and these Christian cultures, for lack of a better term. I know this one, I just can't think of it right now. It really does seem like the closest thing to a paradise or uh, an afterlife that is like heaven is just a place where you can be tranquil and rest. And given how tough life was here and how unforgiving the climate is, let alone the people around you, it's not hard to posit why the paradise of the Norse is tranquility and rest, whereas the paradise of a much less brutal environment, such as a lot of European areas and Mediterranean, things like that, is a place where you are happy, a place where you can uh, be free of sin, right, and be free of temptation. I guess the best way I could summarize my conclusions that I'm drawing from this, tentative conclusions, of course, and also applying my own historical lens to it as a someone who graduated with a bachelor's in history, not a hefty degree, but it's better than nothing, right? I guess what I would say from this and from the limited information I've been presented with is it seems that cultures that grew around areas of abundance, such as the European, Mediterranean, East, Middle East, etc., they value a freedom from temptation. So those in abundance value freedom from temptation, freedom from sin, right? Whereas those who grew up in an unforgiving climate, in a world of tough people, or a tough landscape filled with even tougher people, value serenity and peace. And I want to make something clear, of course. I'm not saying that one values one, so thus the other does not, right? It's simply on a hierarchy of what is valued and what is emphasized within these afterlives. So, to summarize my summary, those who grow in abundance desire freedom from temptation. Those who grow in adversity desire freedom from strife. And it seems like that's the a theme I'm seeing with these two different interpretations of the afterlife, which is really interesting. I think that's further supported by the fact that they both have their own versions of the underworld, right? Of hell. As it says here, Nastrand, in the deepest parts of Helheim, is the place for murderers, traitors, perjurers, a place where you're tormented and punished. A hall built of corpses and serpents that torment those who sat there. So the stick is there, right? The what is bad is certainly there and is certainly very similar in these two different cultures, but they're opposite, or even just places for people who aren't like unrectifiable sinners is very different. And I just think that's really cool. I love exploring these different cultures and how their potential historical background and upbringing has brought these things about. For my next comment of the day, I'm going to respond to another tried and true member of the IPPC, Ketch, who's also one of the OGs, actually. And this one is about Thor's. But this one I'm going to disagree with slightly. Though not necessarily disagreeing with Ketch, because he hasn't really explained his terms, so I'm going to explain how I interpret his terms and then disagree with that one. So I guess you could say I'm consciously and openly disagreeing with a potential straw man of Ketch's. And even that is a very slight disagreement. And that's the idea of the gentle giant trope. Now, I usually like to start disagreements with what I agree with. It is cliche to say the least, yeah. The idea of this incredibly powerful and often unstoppable force that is just has a heart of gold and is like super generous and soft when he's not in battle. And sometimes they are like they change when they're in battle, they become hardened. Sometimes they stay soft and they just end up being like they hit really freaking hard. There's all these different kinds of gentle giants, right? And yeah, it is a cliche, and you could argue it's tired. I would argue, like with most things, it's really about how you do it. But the point of these cliches is that if you choose to do it, regardless of whether you'll do it well or not, you're walking on thin ice, right? Because people start judging you for the cliche. Thankfully, the part where I disagree with is I don't think this is a good twist on it. And that's because I don't think this is using that trope at all. I would not call Thoris a gentle giant. Now, is he a giant? I think so. And is he gentle? Oftentimes, yes. But I don't think he really fits the stereotype of the gentle giant, the archetype of it. And that's simply because I don't think he's gentle in the term that gentle giant implies. He is a patriarch, right? I don't remember, I'm pretty sure he's the village chief, and he acts like it, right? I would say he very much embodies a classic masculinity, a willingness and openness to defend the people he cares about and to stand up to those who threaten him, but not an eagerness, right? And a sense of comfort given by those around him that are under his care. I think all of that falls into classic masculinity, falls into the image of masculinity that has been lost to time more and more, unfortunately, especially as the internet has highlighted its antonym, toxic masculinity, right? Thor's is positive masculinity in pretty much all the best ways. And while it is similar to a gentle giant, I think it is different enough because I don't think gentle's a really good word for him. I think he's very firm. I think he's very rough. Now, he can talk softly and he can be a very welcoming and warm presence, but I don't think that qualifies him as a gentle giant. And I guess the reason why I wanted to point out this distinction is because I haven't really seen an archetype that Thor's represents nearly as much as I've seen something like a gentle giant. This kind of archetype, this character built around this positive, warm masculinity, I would say isn't present enough in popular culture, at least nowadays, to really be a trope or even be a cliche. I think I kind of wish it was. I wish there were more characters like this, but I'm saddened by the fact that I can say I don't think it really is. I think Thor's kind of doesn't stand on his own, but doesn't fit neatly into an archetype beyond that positive classic masculinity. So, yeah, it's a bit of a, not a nitpick, but it's a bit of a pedantic disagreement with Ketch here, and it may seem like I'm disagreeing for just for the sake of it, and I kind of am because I like disagreeing with Ketch. That's that's a joke, of course. It just so happens that lately we've been doing it a little bit. We've been tossing things back and forth, but yeah, I really, really like Thor's, and I don't think somebody who has this positive masculinity and who has this softness to them while being hardened and being very willing to stand up for himself and stand up for those around him and shed blood and chop people in half when he needed to. I don't think that warmness makes you a gentle giant. And obviously being tall, the giant part we're downplaying a little bit. I think you can be this tough, masculine person, this non gentle giant, while also being warm and friendly and loving. So small but I think meaningful differences that I guess it's less of a disagreement with Ketch and more building out these ideas and defining the terms that as far as when I'm reading his comments. So yeah, Ketch, if you agree with my interpretation, if you have your own that you disagree with, or if you just want to build off of my ideas or build off your own, then yeah, I'd love to see you in this comment and maybe I'll see you in the next comment of the day and we can build that out even further. The final comment I wanted to spotlight in this pre-up prep is by Mr. Light. Say it with me, regular in the IPPC. With this one, though, I wanted to comment on just a single point. And it's right down here with the middle paragraph, where he talks about the implications of the how normal slavery is in the society and how normalized it seems to be. With Ilva just casually mentioning it, right? Like, why don't we have a slave yet? With the with Thorfinn, who doesn't seem surprised at all that there's a slave here. He's more surprised that his father is doing what he can to take care of it. So it seems pretty normal, and I agree with that. I think it is something that, in this day and age, this one, the 11th century, it is perfectly normal, right? It's just a part of life. And I assume this slavery, it seems to me to be of a similar slavery to what the Romans and even the Greeks did, where it's basically just captured people you have cultures you have defeated who you basically just take in as your people rather than necessarily buying them off from like Africa as we did in the Americas as we do. Geez, gotta watch my Freudian slips. And the thing I really wanted to comment on that I found really interesting is how he likens it to eating meat for most people today. And it was that comment that got me thinking and made me want to include this in the pre-up prep. Just a bit of positing. Because initially I was like, no, they're not even close to the same, owning slaves and eating meat. But then I put my historical glasses back on and I thought, huh, I wonder if centuries from now, if a millennium from now, what if technology advances and we realize that animals have souls? What if technology advances and we realize that they are just as conscious and sentient as people are? And as a society, we decide it is wrong to be consuming this meat and to mass produce these animals to slaughter them. Now, a lot of you may be saying we do that right now, and I wouldn't disagree with you. But I think that's similar to people who were against slavery back then. The interesting thing about learning history is once you get far enough into it, you learn to apply that lens and flip it around. So you start looking at your present as a future historical moment. So, like, I'm looking at this 11th century slavery as a historical instance. I'm trying to look at 21st century meat eating as a potential historical moment. Will this just be another part where we just continue eating meat forever? Probably we're omnivores, but it's entirely possible that we may rise up as a society and decide it's morally wrong. And it's morally something that we should denounce, like slavery. And I think that's just really interesting. It's something that I don't see enough in the public discourse about things like veganism, and I'm not a vegan whatsoever. I love meat, and I'm not going to apologize for it. In that same way of thinking, if I were to suddenly time travel 1,000 years in the future and no one ever eats meat anymore, I would not denounce myself for eating meat. And in that same line of thinking, I will not denounce anyone who lived in a slavery centric world, a society that normalized slavery, and denounce any singular person for owning slaves. Because it is what is normal within their culture, right? Historians a millennium from now should not judge me for eating meat, judging by their standards. We should not judge people of slave owning societies for owning slaves from our standards. Historians, and really everyone, should always take care and would gain from would should take care to always analyze and ideally not judge at all, but if you will judge a culture, judge them by their own standards, right? It sounds obvious when you say it out loud, but it's something that is woefully lacking in a lot of historical discourse. Not academic. I think academics are pretty good at this, but in the popular realm, right? So just food for thought. Food, god damn it, I did not do that on purpose. Okay, but I've been here too long. It's time to get into the episode. So yeah, this is the comment of the day. Thank you for that, everyone. Especially to Mr. Light, Sumknown, and Alex. And if I didn't comment on all your stuff, for those three of you, obviously I'm not saying those are the best parts of your comment. Those are the parts I wanted to comment on. And for the rest of you, if I didn't bring you up, same thing. It's not that you're any worse of a comment. I mean, I pinned one that isn't a comment of the day because I just found it really funny. It is these comments of the day, and especially this is for you guys who are new. It is explicitly for things I think I can build off on and something I want to talk about. It is not the best comment of the last video. It is simply the thing I want to most talk about. So I heart everyone that I read and that I feel like hearting. Like this one is kind of stands alone, not really worth a heart. Retro, you absolute scumbag. But something like this, yeah, I will. So yeah, just a little sights of like what's behind the scenes and how I work here, and I'm getting into a tangent again, so we're gonna move on from the comment of the day. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to be in the next comment of the day, go ahead, drop your comment. Pretty simple. If I heart it, I've read it, and if I really want to talk about it, I might pin it. If there's a funny one, I might pin that, but I will bring it up the next episode, so I hope to see you there. But with all that said, let's get into the episode. Oh, pardon if I've moved my mic around a little bit. This is a temporary setup. However, I still do want to try to get the best audio I can. I noticed that was a little bit echoey. It seems that this mic does best when you surprise speak into it, and I don't really have a good place I can put it in front of me, so I'm just messing around trying to find the best place for the audio, and that doesn't look super weird. So I'm just going to be experimenting with that. Hope you don't mind. But regardless, it's time for Vinland Saga. One last thing before I get into it, though, if you're new here, I do full reactions. However, they will be altered visually and auditorily for copyright. If you want the unaltered version, that's going to be on Patreon for $2 a month. Also on Patreon, but for free, is my Discord, where you can interact with my community, my IPPC, and even get exclusive updates from me and random unhinged thoughts that I have throughout the day. So join that if that interests you. But I'm going to put that YouTuber Patreoner housekeeping stuff out of the side for now, and we're going to hop into Vinland Saga, Season 1, Episode 2. Really strong start with the last episode, so we'll see if this one can continue it. Starting right off with the opening. I do really like this opening. I'm curious to see if, as I keep watching, there'll be more to comment on. This doesn't seem super, like, symbolically focused. It seems more about setting the atmosphere. It's interesting that there's quite a bit of green here. Means we'll probably be focusing more on Iceland than Greenland moving forward. We're also going to be meeting a lot of characters I got to get the names for. There's also a bit of interesting bit of isolation there, as he's not with everyone else, sharpening his weapon. Which means I've got a bad feeling this is going to be equal parts about finding Vinland as it is going to be some sort of revenge story. Oh, that's the that's from episode 1, right? That's the grave of the slave? The slave grave, if you would. It's really interesting. That's definitely the best part of the opening, though. Did that guy just, like, eat a finger? What the heck? Okay, fine, that's the best part of the opening, but we're not counting the obvious stuff, right? Other than the last scene, that transition between him getting, like, older is the best part. Northern England Earldom of Northumbria. Northern England? Huh. All Might's a Viking? Okay, we are going. We're going full Pirates of the Caribbean with this. Ooh. Vikings are basically the pirates of their day. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot more context, so I shouldn't judge them, but they seemed horribly unprepared for this. Yeah, that's not good. This is the world we live in. The world they live in. This is thankfully not the world that most of us live in. Ugh. It's just like, what in the world is happening to my water all of a sudden? And we're back here. Turn this down a little bit. Totsugeki! Yeah, you don't want to be on the receiving end of a troop of spearheads. Left you behind. Is that a sword stabbed into his chest? And I'm pretty sure you joined to train, not to eat. I'm sure eating is a huge carrot towards that regard. They're not really warriors, so I kinda doubt you. Kinda doubt it. The leg. Okay, interesting. So they're still in, like, trade relations. Or is this kind of, like, under the hood? Very well. Absolutely. Not that I have, like, much of any experience having mead. But I do love me a good glass of wine. Ooh, is that the square guy we saw last episode? I guess I should call him rectangular. It's kind of wrong calling him square guy. Gotta respect the craftsman. How in the world did you miss that Hulk of a man? Oh, that is quite large. Oof. Wonder who you're from. Where's the troll?
トールズってトールズさんだよな。トロル？
しかしあれは半端な連中じゃねえな。
ハーフ団たちみたいな好きとは違うぜ。お、トールズさん。
Don't tell me they're like from Norway. Some larger area. But then it probably wouldn't just be one ship, right? I guess we're just such a small... Yon's Vikings. What is that? Oh, this is that guy, huh? Oh.
トールズさんに礼を。
まさかここまで探しに来るとはな。
Are they asking for his help? Floki.
ノルウェー遠征以来になりますな、トールズ殿。
Huh.
よもやこのような最果ての地にお隠れとは。
要件を言え、フローキ。
So he probably is done
ま
with
ずは上陸の許可を。
warfare, which I guess makes sense. That big fighting scene was like over a decade ago after all.
声がでけえよあれ。あんまり自分のことを話さない人だからな。
Teenagers, I imagine.
見せろよ。
Young adults too.
たちって言ってたよな。
Yolm no Senshi.
さあ。
Warriors of Yolm.
なんか父上怒ってる。
Which I assume Yolm's Viking is the official English term of it.
伝路各地で多くのデンマーク人がイングランド軍に殺害されました。
Oh, that was by the English troops.
デンマーク国王スベンの妹君、グンヒルド様もいたとのこと。
Ooh.
妹の敵討ち。
Sister of the
スベ
king.
ン王は良い口実を得ました。大きな戦が始まります。
Which means it's entirely possible it was set up. Or just a perfect opportunity. Either way, it's not a good sign.
来たる春にはイングランドへの侵攻が始まりましょう。
Jeez.
好きにするがいい。ここは北の最果ての小村だ。
This is well before England
ここ
was
で大国同士が何をしようと。
a major power in the world. I mean, not that it was small in the 11th century, but I don't think it was. Well, I guess it might have been the. It probably was the leader of the Western world. It's because of its naval force.
お分かりかな？そのものがたとえ脱走兵といえどもね。
脱走。
ヨウム戦士団大隊長トロルのトールズ。この度の戦、あなたも参戦するのです。
Doesn't sound like a request.
トールズ殿、この度のことは我が狩猟の恩情なのですよ。15年前行方不明になったあなたがこの度晴れて戦線に復帰する。すべてを不問にしてそういうことにしてくださるというのです。我が狩猟はそれほどにあなたの腕を
Otherwise, you've just abandoned
恐れ
them.
ている。
それを伝えるために軍船で来ることはあるまい。村の者が動揺している。
I assume he wanted to show you he was serious.
お代わりになられましたな、あのトールズ殿が。あるいはこの村が変えたのか。
Time has passed. People change.
良い村だ。子供の様子でわかる。繊細とは今日まで無縁だったのでしょうな。
今日まで. Yeah, that's a threat.
聞いたか、戦だぞ。すっげえ。俺初めてだよ。わざわざ
That's playing a little dirty, but he has every right to do it.
すげえよ、お前の親父さんは。でもよ、俺ら連れてってもらえるかな。
Of course, they're eager for it because they don't know about it. They don't know what it
やっ
entails.
ぱ強くねえとダメか。まあその点俺は大丈夫だな。お前ら人を切ったことねえだろ。そういう経験があるかないかで 悪い。
Good lord, they're big. Yeah, those are the faces of people who have seen war.
私もね、
Very different
子供の使いじゃ
expressions.
ないんですよ。あなたがこたびの戦に加わらぬとおっしゃるなら。
You're part of it
私は
one way or
将軍を下
another.
し我が狩猟の面目も潰れ
Yeah.
そうなればとても手ぶらでは帰れません。
So is Thor's willing to re-enter battle for the sake of his village? I'm sure he is. Even if it's blackmail. I was gonna say effectively blackmail, but it's just blackmail.
ベンドランドの港町ヨムスボルグに基地を持つ軍団だ。
Port Town in Vinland. I'm not familiar where that is.
ヨウムの戦士だったとはな。
強いんすか？
強い。あまりに強くて、
I mean, just look
ベ
at
ンド
him.
ランド王などは彼らから税金を取れないでいるほどさ。
That's
国会最強を
dangerous.
自負する軍団だ。
撤収戦隊裏に戻れ
That gives me pretty strong shogunate vibes. Very strong shogunate vibes.
助かったな、あれ。
Yeah. These people will have no qualms about slaughtering villagers.
私はヨウム戦士団のフローキだ主命により勇者トールズ・スノーレソンに活性を頼むためこの地へ参った
The hero Thor Snorson.
トールズ殿は我が狩猟の求めに応じられ軍船一隻の提供を約束なされた我と思わん者はトールズ殿と共にヨムスボルグへ参られよ
Unfortunately, I've got a bad feeling way too many people are going to step forward.
ではトールズ殿いずれ戦場で会いましょう
Yeah, they're excited. Oh, everyone but Thor's. Oh, that's such a great shot. Ugh. I mean, it's not all just that they're ignorant, right? It's also a culture, a warrior culture, but
断れなかった。
I've no doubt that a large part of it is
村
ignorance,
を巻き込んでしまったな
innocence.
昔
Yeah, even if you
人を
leave war,
殺す
war
ことで
will
身を立てていた
follow you around, especially with a reputation like that.
ある日急に嫌になったんだ殺すのも殺されるのもだから逃げたんだ戦場から
Was that scene when he went to the shore that day?
死んだようにうまく見せかけたつもりだったんだ
Is that why we had the flashback of him in, or not the flashback, but the dream of him with his wife and child
逃げれば
in
この村が俺の代わりに報復される
Vinland?
業務の掟は
That was him realizing that,
許さない
yeah, that was him realizing that he doesn't want to live on the battlefield anymore.
自分のしてきたことに
You can't just make that choice, right?
来たんだ
You can't just make a name for yourself as a killer and assume you can walk away whenever you want.
よし、引くぞ
Affected too many lives, positively and negatively.
あれレイフさん今日出航じゃなかったっけ？
トールズに頼まれたんだ。その軍船と船団を組むことに
He wants your sailing
そう
expertise.
か確かにその方が安全だいざって時は俺らが守ってやるからよ
Doesn't look too happy about it though.
そりゃ頼もしい。
Doesn't look too happy at all about it.
しかしな、どいつも戦好きなことよ。
Yeah. They love the image of war they have in their head.
くっそートルフィンのやつ囲め囲めやろうやったトルフィンなんだよ死ねよトルフィン今やられただろルール守れよな
Come on, first rule of war. When you're killed, you're supposed to die.
大丈夫か
Come
待
on.
てよトル
He's probably upset because he won't be able to join his father, though. I really hope you won't be able to join his father.
上げるぞ。よし、もう一度行くぞ。
通るぜ。ちょっと見てやってくれないか。
折れてるな。子供の遊びにしちゃやりすぎだ。
Not too
一
excited.
月の間、添え木をしておいてくれ。
すまんな、通
Oh,
るぜ。
jeez.
トルフィンがやったんだよ。あいつ最近ムカつくんだ。手加減しねえし。もう絶対
Psyching
仲間に入れ
lately.
てやんね
本当か。うちの子が。それはすま
Probably
なかった
also upset because of
よく
what
言って聞かせる。
the sailor told him
気
before
にすんなよ。子供同士のことだ。
about his lineage, about how they ran away.
4つ5つ上の子たちに
It's
怪
only
我させるか。
6, jeez.
大したもんだよ。いい戦士になるぜ、あの子は。やっぱりあんたの血だよ、通るぜ。
In many ways, yeah. Yeah, hard to balance what the right thing to say here is.
じいさまの代からの家宝の分
Not easy being a
存
chief.
分に戦ってこい。
あれおおかっけえぞあれ。
俺のも見てくれ。馬の首を
God,
一
this is
撃で
giving
落とした
such Attack on Titan season 1 episode like 4 vibes as they're getting ready to defend Wall Maria. Shiganshina.
もうあんた
違うしな
って子は何でもかんでも放りっぱなしにすんなよな。
The moment when everyone gets slaughtered.
片付けないと捨てちゃうよ。いいの？いい。もういらない。
Mm,
なんなのよ、物置ひっくり返して。うちの武器はどこ？は？
he really wants to go for
僕
long.
には武器が必要なんだ。武器があれば。
He'd let me
あんたさて
join.
は戦士になって父上の船に乗せてもらっちゃおうとか考えてる？言っとくけどね、無駄な努力よ。あんたみたいなちびっ子が。
Treasure chest.
トルフィン？
Some sort of like sphere? Oh, is this where the dagger is that we saw last episode? Yeah. A lot of stuff in there. Presumably ancestor stuff, lineage. Or potentially even Thor's own items. What an interesting reaction. Jeez. Okay, Thor's.
何？どうしたの、ユルバ？
剣が欲しいか、トルフィン。剣は人を殺す道具だ。お前はこれで誰を殺すつもりなんだ。
Or enemies.
敵。
お前の敵は誰なんだ。
Hmm.
ハーフ団とか。
And what happens when you kill him?
よく聞け、トルフィン。お前に敵などいない。誰にも敵などいないんだ。
Now that's something I've heard from echoed in season 2. One of the few things I know about it.
傷つけて良いものなど。
I have no enemies. I didn't realize it would be mentioned so early in the
お
story.
かしいよ、そんなの。だって父上は明日戦に行くんでしょ。敵を殺しに行くんでしょ。
I'm off to kill other people, not
父上は
enemies.
嘘を言ってる。僕にだってわかる。
トルフィン。
おトルフィンスキャリー危ねえって
Thanks.
ヘルガ。
I feel like this is the first time we've seen her like this. Okay.
あの子を頼む。
I swear, if he sneaks on that damn ship, I'm gonna be pissed. That is a beautiful
西北西から
sunrise.
微風波穏やか
Something about how the reflection of the sun
今
just
朝はオーディン
creates
神
this
の機嫌がいい
this spear down the middle.
出港にはいい
Gorgeous.
朝だな
Hopefully you leave, as horrible as it sounds to say, hopefully you leave before Thorfinn wakes up. Definitely gonna be for the best. Faroe Islands. Straymoy.
よし行ったな左手で投げて命中ならその酒樽は俺のもんだぞ
Oh my god.
当たってから言え行くぞ
That's
キリスト坊主
horrible.
避けたら殺すぞ
Jeez.
避けたろ今避けたろ殺すマジ殺すよ次は俺だ
If you don't die, I'll kill you.
神父様。
だから避けんじゃねえっつ
God, I hate these noises.
おいヨウムの兄さん方あんたらも一杯やらねえか
You still recruiting? Or are they here for a different
お行儀
reason?
が良くていらっしゃる
ほっとけ。安酒はお口に合わねえんだとよ。
Ah.
相変わらず貴様の手下は品がないな。アシェラット。
Okay, well, if he's saying it, I can say it. That's fucked
キリ
up.
スト教が好かねえだけですよ。フローキーの
I'm not gonna judge him by my standards, but if
それより
someone from their time
さっさと
standards is saying that's
仕事の
fucked
話を
up,
しましょう
then
や
I'm all on board with it.
手下どもも俺も
Really cool
こん
they
な
use
僻地
horns
で
for
任されて退
drinks.
屈してたんです。
大きな変更はない。
Ooh, these strings in the
報酬は
background.
金5ポンド。奴の死体
The
と引き換え
piano
でな
also
ければ
building up this
払わ
tension,
ぬ
this uneasy feeling.
奴の船と積み荷はお前たちの好きに
Whose
して
dead body? So he's being hired
ポ
as a
ー
merc,
ルズを
basically.
殺せ。
Oh. Okay. So it's looking like I was right. It's definitely not going to be some short 2-episode backstory arc. I could see this going as long as 4 or even 5 episodes. Maybe not 5, maybe probably closer to 4 or 3. But it does seem like it's going to be like the first proper arc of the story, rather than just a quick introduction to his past. Which is cool, I like that. I'm glad that we're not sectioning these off into, oh, the 2 episodes are when he's a kid, and then after that he's an adult. It's like, these are different parts of his life, right? It may not be anything as dramatic as Mushoku Tensei, which admittedly I haven't seen either. I just know about its general format, but I do like this format for a story. Love the ending to that. ED. Alright, that was Vinland Saga Season 1, Episode 2, and while I'm glad things didn't quite go as south as I was worried they would this episode, I've got a feeling it's just delaying it, and in doing so, making it even worse when it eventually does come up. So, we open things up with this attack on the Vikings base by the English, and I realized I had that backwards. It's not the English who were being attacked, it's the English who were attacking the Vikings since they were bathing on a Saturday. Which, it's brutal. It does seem really odd, though, because it strikes me as strange that the Vikings, who are so battle-hardened and so war-ready, such a warrior culture, would leave themselves so exposed. Now, it's not to say there were no guards here, and obviously it seems the English had devised a strategy to sneak around them for the large part by going underwater. But regardless, again, this is like, these aren't unforeseen enemies, right? So, or maybe it is. Maybe they're at peace, but I would be inclined to think no, because in these times, even if you are really at peace and you're like trading with somebody, there's nothing that will stop them from changing that immediately, right? And again, for a culture as warrior centric as the Vikings, it seems a little bit strange that they were at all caught unawares like this. Like, if Saturdays are the days for bathing, why do you have an entire day for bathing in a world as rough, as brutal, as unforgiving as this? And it is part of their custom, it says. So again, this is maybe just my own ignorance, and maybe I'm sure people in the IBPC and you guys, if you're not part of it yet, can go ahead and clarify in the comments. Maybe there's something I'm missing. But don't comment yet, because I'm going to build off of this in just a minute when I get to later in the episode. But it does seem like quite the oversight on their part. And I wonder if it's intentional. Jeez. Absolutely brutal, though. Regardless, the whole point is that the English have attacked and they basically razed that village to the ground. And just as the English fall, so does Thorfinn and his friend. It is interesting, though. He seems so much more okay with this training, right? Like, compared to later in the episode when he's so out of it and he's so done with it and so much rougher with it. This time, like, before he learns about this craziness about the war that's about to be kicking off, he seems much more down with these playing kitty games. And again, I'll talk about that in a little bit, but a little bit of village chief learning to respect the craftsmen. But then the warship that we saw at the end of last episode arrives, and we meet Floki. And they bow, interestingly enough. It doesn't seem like they're here for conflict. At least not yet. And it turns out they're on a recruitment mission explicitly for Thors. And I like the little detail of first give me permission to land. Again, showing that respect, right? Like we saw at the last episode with Halfdan, that's his name. But there's this respect between these adults, right? And especially with the when in regards to Thors, right? Because he demands respect, even though he's not a big fighter. So we learned about the surprise attack while they were bathing, and we learned about the Danes, several of the important Danes who died. Particularly the sister of Sweyn, the king of Denmark, which gives him a good excuse to start a war. And this is what I was alluding to earlier, why I said I was going to revisit that. This strikes me as suspicious. And maybe this is my historical bias taking front stage, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. As you may or may not know, a very large number, I won't say the majority, but a very large number of conflicts, both in the history and art and even in the present day, are not fake per se, but they're certainly set up. Somebody in power decides they want something. They try to figure out how to do it, and the best way to accomplish that something, namely war, oftentimes, is by putting together circumstances that will allow them to engage in this war. Because they need a reason, right? I mentioned earlier that it seems silly that they were unprepared for an attack because they don't seem to be in conflict, that they're not at war right now, it seems. That's pretty clear. I don't take back the fact that they should be ready anyways. But that is worth noting, that they don't seem to be in active conflict, and they're about to be. The reason I said I would bring this back up, and why I'm bringing it back up here, is because the fact that the English were able to get around and slaughter them so easily, just by taking advantage of a seventh of the days is their day devoted to bathing. A seventh of every week is devoted to bathing. That is a massive opportunity to attack. And the Vikings aren't stupid. They would have taken that into consideration. So it leads me to the inclination that these English were assisted, perhaps by the King of Denmark, who wants this war. Perhaps by Floki, who wants this war. Perhaps by the Viking culture, who wants war. Not to say that Vikings themselves are just like bloodthirsty, mindless war machines, but the point is that there's a lot of them, right? Their culture, especially in this time, is largely built around conquest and about attaining more resources, right? It's not limited to Vikings, it's just kind of human nature, acquiring more resources. So getting the perfect opportunity to engage in this war, to have a justified reason for aggression accomplishes your goals, and if a village has to burn down, so be it. Now, I mostly hope I'm wrong. I think it would be interesting, so I kind of hope I'm right, but I hope I'm wrong just because the humanist in me, I really would rather this not be a king allowing basically causing their own village to get burned down just so they can accomplish their aims in warfare. But I can't really silence that voice because there's too much of a historian in me knocking on the walls saying a lot of this is very wrong. A lot of it. And I didn't just pause on this face by chance. Loki seems a little bit too excited for this. The Jomsviking will join Denmark. This coming spring, our invasion of England will begin. Do what you will, we're far away from there. It's none of my business. Oh, but it is. We're gathering the entire fleet. We need every strong man, even if it's a man who deserted the army. Which basically confirms the, I guess not really a suspicion because it's kind of brought up after this, but the suspicion you might have had after the first episode with, like, 2 decades ago, he was in this full war and now he's seemingly retired, as close to retired you can get in this time. For those who are suspicious of that and thinking that those two are very much related, as it seems they are, a reasonable conclusion is that he left and that he forsake his bloody hands. And in a culture like Vikings, especially where you are a captain, like the captain, where you are one of the most regaled warriors, probably in the culture around, that is desertion, right? Whether or not it's wrong, whether or not he has a right to put up his sword, is a whole nother argument. But in the context of this culture, which is the most important context to analyze this, it is desertion, right? It just kind of is. It's brutal. But it's reality. He's not giving him the option here. He's not saying, we'd like you to join us. He's not saying, it would be reassuring to have you on our side. He's saying, you will fight this war. And as we see very soon, if you don't, there's going to be issues. I love how Thor's immediately goes to the point that the villagers are frightened. You don't need a warship for this. And Loki picks up on this change of character, right? This is different. This isn't how a warrior should talk. You should know the reason why we have warships, this intimidation factor, and also just you shouldn't care so much about these peaceful little villagers and their peaceful little feelings, right? What does that matter? Don't tell me they changed you. It's just tough. I mean, I said it in the episode, but it's just blackmail, right? It's just blackmail. If you don't help us, then, well, your village may pay the price. Clearly they changed you, which means they're at fault. Which means it wouldn't be unreasonable of me to punish them for that. After Floki makes the least subtle threat of all time, we switch over to the kids who are running around all too excited about the war. And I love how this guy makes his comment about, you haven't killed anyone, right? It depends on whether you have experience killing or not. And as he's saying that, perfect timing, he runs into the perfect example of his point. Because these are the eyes of somebody who's killed, right? These are the eyes of somebody who probably kills regularly. In comparison, these are the faces of people who barely know what it means to kill somebody. You're excited for the chance to kill somebody. I'm preparing for my next opportunity. We are not the same. After making his threat much more explicit, he announces that it's time to get out of here. There's a comment made about how the King of Vinland can't even collect taxes from them, which is very shogunate coded. If you somehow aren't aware, I'm referring to Japan when I mention the shogunate, and specifically I'm referring to how, for a large part of Japan's history, not just in one period, but especially during the Tokugawa shogunate, there was a period where the military realized that they were so powerful that they basically run the country. So they might as well run the country. So they ran the country. And the emperor was basically just a figurehead, almost less. He was really just focused on the art. He was more of an artist than a political leader. And yeah, the military basically ran the world because they realized they could. Japanese world, of course. And that's giving me very strong vibes here. I've got a bad feeling that if this hasn't already, and that isn't already the case, which doesn't quite seem to be, I wouldn't be surprised if eventually these people decide we don't really need to follow the king's instructions when we can just do our own. For as much reverence as this guy seems to give his master, his king, this does not look like the expression of somebody who's submissive. This looks like the expression of somebody who wants something. And as we see at the end of the episode, someone who's willing to do whatever he needs to in order to get something. So Loki departs, and this young gentleman makes a far too ecstatic exclamation that it's wartime. Which, in his defense, is kind of what they've trained for all this time, right? And it's kind of what their culture is, in a way, based around. Unfortunately, I think he and many others are going to realize that just because they've spent their lives preparing for this does not mean they're ready for it. And it certainly doesn't mean that they're going to like what they see when they get there. Now, is that to say that all of them will hate it? I'm sure not. I'm sure there are some genuine, bloodthirsty people who are going to love the war battlefield. But it feels a little too poignant that the one person who presumably has seen more war than all of the others combined in this shot is the one person who's not celebrating. Because while the adults are excited about the prestige, the youths are excited about the opportunity, and the children are excited about the possibility. The warrior doesn't share their excitement, does he? Because the warrior knows the reality. And this might be my favorite shot of the show so far, because it just encompasses everything, right? Even down to the details of Thorfinn looking forward with determination, excitement that his dream of going out and partaking in battle may soon come true, and in the meanwhile, his father, who's literally twice his size, has his eyes on the ground, his hands curled into fists, like his son, but in a very different posture, defeated. Because the people he's tried to protect from war all this time is now being dragged into it. Because of him, according to him. It's tough, it's horrible, it's brutal, and I think we all know this is only going to turn out horribly. And no one knows that better than Thor's, right? A long time ago, I earned my living by killing. One day, I suddenly found myself hating it all. That's why I ran. If I run now, the village will be punished in my place. They never forgive deserters. Probably only kept me alive because of what I represented, because of my usefulness, right, for something like this. But I do think this is really interesting. Especially the implication that that scene that we saw in the beginning was both his final battle as well as his realization that he no longer wants this. I'm presuming that's the symbolism of the dream that he had, of the vision where he was in Vinland with his family. The idea that he could be living that life instead, but here he is on the battlefield. It could also be symbolic of him wanting a peaceful life like that, but being aware that his bloody path will prevent him from it. He tries to walk towards her, right, in the first scene, but he steps on a helmet. He tries to walk towards the peaceful life he wants, but is unable to because of his bloody past. That moment, I suppose, is bloody present. And that's really brutal. It adds even more meaning to that first scene, and also adds some bit of dramatic irony and some not great feelings about having a general idea of where the show is going to go. I don't know if Thor's is going to die necessarily. I've got a bad feeling he will, but I do know that Thorfinn is going to grow up to not be the healthiest of adults or teenagers, or whatever he is in the majority of the show, or at least in this opening, the main part of the show. What I presume to be. He seems very bloodthirsty. He seems filled with what I assume is vengeance. So the fact that we have his father, this pinnacle of masculinity, of positive masculinity, who found himself sick of war and decided to leave it, and we're learning this in episode 2. It has that level of dramatic irony, right? Of having a general idea of where this protagonist is going and not being able to do anything about it. That's the essence of a Greek tragedy, right? You know the outcome and you can't prevent it. You can only watch it unfold. And it doesn't take knowing that Thorfinn's going to get older and have this like vengeful side to him. Just knowing history, knowing how horrible war is, you can get that feeling just with that, right? It's just brutal. It's just absolutely heartbreaking. Time to take responsibility for what I've done. Thorfinn finally snaps out of his stupor and gets all excited. And then he's told he can't come because of course not. I wanted to pause for a moment and discuss this line that Thor's very understandably drops. It's time to take responsibility for what I've done. And I wanted to pause just for a moment to reflect on whether he really has this responsibility he's claiming. Now, I think most of us will agree that responsibility is by and large a good thing. Taking responsibility is something that is a little bit lacking in today's society and has been, to be fair, throughout history. People have been famously bad at taking responsibility. And it's generally seen as a good thing to be willing to and to be open to taking responsibility, right? And further, in his support, I think there is a lot to take responsibility for. Killing other lives, right? Ending other lives, servicing yourself in war to another cause, trying to hang up your helmet and walk away from it and thinking you can. Those are all things that, at the very least, in a void, yeah, you could and arguably should take responsibility for it. But on the other side, how much of this is really his fault? Or at least his fault specifically. Not his fault by proxy of the culture he grew up in, which I would say crosses off him participating in war. Not the fault of other people choosing to enforce their beliefs on him, punishing deserters. I think once you remove those, then the only responsibility really left to him to claim that's really his own is believing that he could just hang up his cape, right? Put away his sword and retire to a peaceful village. And even then, there are absolutely arguments you can make that it's not his responsibility. But I think what's more important than deciding how much responsibility he has and trying to find a numerical value of that, more important than that is what it means, that responsibility means to him. Because whenever it comes to ideas of responsibility and taking blame and making up for your mistakes, I'm personally always more interested in what that means moving forward rather than what that says about you in the past. In other words, I could argue until the sun sets about whether he's at fault for what he did. I'm more interested in how it affects him moving forward. And I think in that regard, my opinions are mixed. I do think it's a shame that he feels he needs to take responsibility for trying to step away from the life of bloodshed. And his taking responsibilities, presumably going to war, right? And sacrificing his desire to live in peace so that his village can. And I think that's good responsibility. I think it's good to not drag the village into it, at least more than necessary. On the other hand, I think he's also reaching the conclusion that he was wrong to try to leave the battlefield, which I think is sad. I think it's really sad because while this is based on our own morals, again, of our modern times, there is this feeling that he shouldn't be punished for wanting to leave the life he led, right? He shouldn't be punished for wanting to pursue peace. Given the world he lives in, it's almost natural. It's hardly surprising that he is being punished for it. But it just feels frustrating because I can already tell he's arriving at the conclusions that I don't think he should. The idea that I shouldn't have done this, that I have already dragged you into this, and that was my mistake. I don't think it was a mistake for him to leave like that. I don't know if there is any particular mistake I could point to that I would say he should have done this instead. I guess in summary, I will say the best thing I think that he takes out of this and showcasing yet more of his good character is that he's willing to go along with Loki rather than like tell everyone we need to leave because I'm not going back to the battlefield. He's saying, so most of you guys can live in peace, we will go out to war, right? And that's good. I think it's hard to argue that that's a bad decision, that that's a decision of a bad leader. Regardless of it harm it does to those he's leaving behind. So we get into the second part where everyone starts preparing for the trip, and everyone is super excited, except Thorfinn, who seems to be quite a bit different from before, especially the first training that we saw. He seems quite fed up about something, and we quickly learn why, and that's because he's learned that he is not going to be going with them. Because of course he's not, right? But before that, actually, there was something interesting here. He grew up to be a good fighter. He takes after you. And I didn't quite catch this in my first watch, but I think him looking around at all these people who are injured and in pain, I think Thor's is a little bit not quite sure how to feel about the fact that Thorfinn is taking after him. I think he agrees that Thorfinn is shaping up to be quite like him and to be quite powerful and a little bit ruthless. That is like Thor's, right? Or at least like how like Thor's was. But I don't think that makes Thor's particularly happy because I think he's seeing the suffering and pain that growing up to be like Thor's entails. And I think that's the unspoken look in his eyes right there. Thorfinn is clearly upset, throws down his training sword, and I'm gonna throw it away if you don't pick it up. You can throw it away, I don't care anymore. Presumably because I need a real weapon, not the stupid training stuff they're giving me. Because if I get a real weapon, I can fight a real war. And they won't lump me in with those other little kids, right? I don't love this reaction. He's a little too entranced by this blade, I'm not gonna lie. He's a little bit too happy about that thing. Thankfully, before he can get too drawn into its beautiful gleam of the pristine blade, Thor's appears, and we have easily the best conversation of the show so far, and presenting what I can only assume will be one of the key themes moving forward. The concept of having no enemies. A sword is a tool for killing people. Who are you planning to kill with this? The enemy. And who is your enemy? Like, Halfdan, people who try to hurt me, people I know. Listen. You don't have any enemies. No one has any enemies. There's no one who it's okay to hurt. You're wrong. You're going off to war yourself. You're going to kill the enemy. Don't patronize me. And he runs off. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume this is the part that a lot of you were excited for me to reach for this episode. And I hate to disappoint you, but we're not actually going to be talking about this because I'm more interested in... I'm kidding. I'm kidding, of course. Of course I'm going to talk about this, right? Of course I'm going to touch on this, and I've got this feeling I'm going to be touching on this quite a bit throughout this story. What is an enemy? An enemy is very different from an opponent, right? From a rival, from a competitor. Enemy has far more of a connotation to it. An enemy is somebody you are hostile towards, right? Not just somebody you are fighting against in conflict with, but an enemy is somebody that you kill with intent. It's not necessarily somebody you hate, but it usually is, right? There is a lot of vitriol, a lot of pain, and a desire to inflict suffering on your enemy. So when Thor says, you have no enemies, nobody has any enemies, it sounds like he's commenting on the fact that an enemy is somebody it's okay to hurt, right? Somebody that is okay to hurt because they've wronged you. At least that's what an enemy is from your perspective, right? When you have enemies. Because it's not okay to hurt anybody, you shouldn't have any enemies. There shouldn't be anyone you think it's okay to hurt because hurting people is inherently wrong. That seems to be Thor's perspective. And You may be surprised to hear that I actually disagree with this. I disagree with this claim that no one has any enemies. Because people do, right? Lots of people have lots of people that they're more than willing to hurt. That they think it's more than okay to hurt. They think it's justified to hurt. That's why we have so much conflict in the world. A large reason. Now, I think what he's trying to say, what he wants to say, is that nobody should have any enemies. An ideal world has no enemies, has nobody who wants to hurt others. But reality isn't so simple, right? If we could choose what other people feel and whether they have enemies or not only would we not have any conflict, we wouldn't really have a society because we wouldn't have individuals. The essential part about having individuals in a society is that we don't get to choose, right? What other people think. So I do agree with him that we shouldn't have enemies. An ideal state of the world is a world without enemies. But to say that nobody has any enemies, and admittedly he's probably simplifying this for a 6-year-old to understand. But regardless, the statement itself is just kind of false, right? You can't assume that everyone has your same moral beliefs. Not only are there people who have enemies, there are people who are glad to have enemies. There are people who would proudly disagree that you shouldn't have enemies, that there are people who it's not okay to hurt. Not all of them are going to be people who reluctantly have enemies, right? Who can't get over that hurdle of having no enemies. Many people take pleasure in hurting. Many people take pleasure in having enemies. So fundamentally, I suppose I agree with him that people shouldn't have enemies. In an ideal world, there aren't. But not only in reality people have enemies, in reality people enjoy having enemies. So I think there are too many levels of separation to make this something that is even achievable. I much prefer the fact what he says first. You don't have any enemies. Now, I've got a feeling that this show will prove this wrong too. I think Thorfinns can have many enemies, but I think this is much easier to aspire to. You can't affect others, but you can affect yourself, right? You can't affect how others think, I should say. But you can affect how you think, and you can affect how you perceive. You can't decide that nobody should have any enemies, or that you can make a world where nobody has any enemies, but you can work towards not having any enemy. You can decide to work towards a world, your world, where you have no enemies, where there is nobody you find it's okay to hurt, where you find no pleasure in the suffering of others, where you can't justify inflicting pain on people. That's much more achievable. And I assume that's why I think the one like pseudo spoiler I know, that at least I think I know in season 2, is something went kind of viral where somebody says I have no enemies. And that is something to aspire to be like, right? Not there are no enemies in the world. Nobody has any enemies, but I have no enemies. The world outside I can't control, be damned. This is my truth. And that's admirable. And I also really like how Thorfinn calls this out. It's not okay to hurt anyone, yet you're going off to war. And while it's fair to call this out, I think the nuance that he's missing, stupid 6-year-old, is that Thors doesn't take pleasure in this, right? He's doing it to protect his people. He's actively against hurting people, which probably has been brewing for decades now. It's why he left war, most likely. So he's going off to war, but he also has no enemies, right? I'm not going to kill the enemy. I'm going to kill the people who would threaten you. I'm going to kill the people that other people want me to kill, so those other people don't threaten you. Everything I'm doing is for your sake, not for the enemy's sake. That's why for Thors, those are not enemies, they are simply opponents. I do not think I'm right in killing them. I will simply do what I believe I must. Good morning for your departure. Beautiful morning for your departure. So we get to this, and they're throwing that stuff. I'm gonna skip through this because it's kind of horrible. Our men don't have any class. I agree with you there. And we meet this new character who's clearly another antagonist, and probably our probably an immediate antagonist that we've got very soon. Askeladd. We're not classless, we just hate Christians. We make an exception. My men are bored of being kept here waiting in the middle of nowhere. Speaking of people who are happy to have enemies, right? You can everyone the ship and the cargo. Your mission is to kill Thors. And that's where we leave it off on. I won't spend too much time positing and throwing out random theories as to why he wants Thors dead. This is a channel about analysis, not about prediction, in case you couldn't tell already. I do think it's really interesting, though. You're already seeing it just in episode 2, these machinations and these deeper levels, these nuances that it's not just our side versus theirs, right? These people have all their own motivations, their own desires, their own machinations, their own plans, right? And whether that's what he wants, or whether that's what the king wants, or maybe neither of them wants it. Maybe he's going even a step beyond, and he wants to get rid of this aggressor guy, whose name starts with an A. Maybe he wants to get rid of him by having him attack Thors. Maybe he wants to test Thors. There's all these different ideas, right? But someone as hardened as Loki, you can't really tell, can you? He's a powerful man. If he has political ambitions, then I wouldn't put it past him to want Thor's dead. As I said, I'm not going to spend too much time thinking about that. I think the show will tell us itself at some point. Until then, I'm just excited for the ride. And if you're excited as well, please do subscribe to get notified as soon as the next one comes out. If you liked it, it would really help me out if you liked the video. It shows the algorithm people are engaging with it, so it'll show it to more people. We can build up the community. It also shows me that you really liked it, which is very encouraging for me. I like seeing that people like my stuff. It's cool. Another way you can show your appreciation is by dropping a comment. Like I said, if it's really good, I'll put it in the next comment of the day. And if it's not really good, then I'll delete it. I'm kidding. I don't think I've ever deleted a comment yet. I'm sure that's coming eventually, but I'm going to appreciate these smaller moments when I don't have to. But anyways, I'm going to put all that YouTuber housekeeping stuff away and just thank you for being here, because that's the most important thing. And until the next one, have a lovely rest of your day.